In 2009, John and I were going through a really rough time in our marriage. We had just moved to New Jersey from California, and I think that the move brought a lot of stuff up in our marriage that was there, but we didn't know that it was there.
Rachel and I got married pretty young. I was 22, she had just turned 18. You know, our first 10 years was, it was great. You know, we were happy, we had our 2 kids, and it was about 2009, shortly after we moved out to New Jersey. Even a little before then is when things started taking a turn for the worse.
We weren't communicating, we weren't connecting, we weren't talking to each other hardly at all. When we were talking to each other, it was just things that we had to get done. Did you pay this bill? Sort of a conversation. I actually came out to New Jersey a week ahead of John, and our marriage was going through such a difficult time already at that point. And John came out later with the moving truck, and I felt so hopeless at that time. Like, I remember him getting out of the moving truck, and the kids were running up to him and like saying hello to him because it had been a week since they saw him. And I just remember standing there, and I couldn't even look at him. Like, I just didn't want to be around him. I just got to the bottom of myself. I just came to the bottom of everything that I could do, anything I could offer up to make our marriage be what I wanted it to be. I didn't have anything left to give, and I just felt hopeless.
I was voicing things to her that were important to me that she didn't seem to be acknowledging. Not keeping up with laundry, not cooking good dinners, you know, coming home to a frozen pizza on all too many nights, not having enough sex, not cleaning the house, being really harsh with the kids. I felt like she wasn't being the nurturing mother type enough. There were at least a few times where I brought up the word divorce to her in some of our conversations, some of our arguments. It wasn't because I wanted a divorce. You know, I didn't bring it up in a threatening way or anything like that, but I was just genuinely concerned based on everything that I was seeing and everything I was feeling. And you know, the frequency of our arguments at that point and the intensity of our arguments and how we seemed to argue over stupid things that we never argued about before. It just didn't feel like we were on each other's side.
Neither one of us wanted a divorce. We knew what it would do to our kids, but we also knew that we weren't happy. So I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know what to do, and I just felt like I'm just gonna be miserable for the rest of my life. I'm gonna be married, but I'll be miserable, and that's just kind of what I have to do. That's just my lot in life.
You know, when Rachel and I got married, we each brought into the relationship our own baggage. You know, I had my baggage, she had hers. And we knew about it, we talked about it, you know, but I don't think we realized the extent at which that baggage was gonna play into our marriage.
A lot of the problems that I brought into our marriage stemmed from my childhood. For as long as I can remember, until the time that I was 8 years old, I was being sexually abused by my father. And along with that came physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal and spiritual abuse. I was literally being told that what happened to me happened because I was beautiful, and that's how God made me. So I kind of felt like God did me some sort of an injustice. When I was a kid, I had this image of God kind of putting people together up in heaven, like on a conveyor belt, just pieces of them being put together. And I always had this thought in my mind, I always had this image that when God was making me and I was going by him, that he turned his head for something else caught his attention, and he missed a part of me. So when people would say that God loved me, I believed it, but I believed that God loved me out of pity. I believe that God loved me because I was someone that he screwed up on, so he just loved me out of pity. Because I thought that there was something innately wrong with me and something just so broken from the beginning that I had no control over. It affected my relationships with people because I was always out to prove myself. I wanted to prove myself to God, and I wanted to prove myself to myself. That, maybe I wasn't born perfect, but I could somehow get there. I could somehow be perfect. So I couldn't be wrong. That's where it affected me in my relationships. Like, I could never be wrong. I think that John and I got to that place in 2009 where things felt so hopeless because he was tired of dealing with me always having to be right. And I couldn't be vulnerable with him. That was like a really hard thing for me to do. Like, I could tell him all the facts of a situation and all the facts of something that had happened, but to actually say, this is how I'm feeling about it, like, I couldn't do it. It was too difficult because anytime I felt something, it was painful, and so I didn't want to feel. I had kind of trained myself to just not feel, and it really took a toll on our marriage because I couldn't be vulnerable with him, and we couldn't form those connections.
When I was about 8 years old, my father committed suicide, and I didn't really know him that well. My parents were divorced when I was 2 years old. My mom moved us across the whole country. I saw my dad a handful of times during the summer. And when I was 7 years old, my dad made the move down to Florida where we lived, so that he could be closer to us and spend more time with us. And that was really cool. And I felt like at that time, for the first time, I was really starting to get to know my dad. And it wasn't too long after that, after he had moved down, he committed suicide. And that was it. I lost him. I didn't find out until years later that was how he died. I thought he died from MS, which was a disease that he had. But I found out later he committed suicide, and I had to process that, and that was very difficult. Just trying to understand that my dad, who I didn't even know for very long, had left me. Really, the conclusion that I came to was I wasn't worth sticking around for. My dad, he hung out with me for a year, and then he left. And so that was sort of, anyways, my dad's suicide and that whole thought was a big part of some of the baggage that I brought into our marriage. And then, there's my stepdad, who I grew up with, and he was pretty harsh. He was a bit of a perfectionist, to say the least. And he sort of had perfect expectations on me. He expected a lot out of me, and when I didn't perform to his standard, he let me know it. And so those are two things that I brought into our marriage that I think really affected my relationship with Rachel. I held her to very similar expectations and standards like my stepdad had with me. And I expected a lot from her. A lot of it was unrealistic. And then when she failed to perform, my reaction, I think, was based in my experience with my dad, and that, as I was perceiving it, it was another example of somebody who was communicating to me through their actions that I wasn't really worth it. I wasn't worth the trouble, that I wasn't that important.
My dad said that he was sorry for what happened to me, he was sorry for what he did, but I could have said no. One of the turning points for me in my healing was realizing that I couldn't have said no. That was a huge turning point for me. I was talking with another woman who was kind of taking me through a Bible study regarding sexual healing, and it talks about perpetrators and what they think, like where their mind is and where they come from. And it really opened up my eyes, and it made me see that I was abused, not because I was beautiful and not because I didn't say no, but I was abused because I was there. And that was the bottom line. That's why I was abused. And that had there been anybody else there, they would have been abused. And that thought like really kind of opened me up to realizing like, oh, maybe it's not my fault. Which sounds so ridiculous, but I really internalized it, and I really thought that it was somehow it was something that I had done. And when I received that healing from God regarding my past, and I realized that I wasn't at fault for things, and it wasn't because of who I was, that freed me up in my marriage. It just freed me up to be able to admit that I was wrong, and I didn't have to be perfect. I didn't have to strive to be so perfect. One night, we were talking about something, John and I. We started arguing about something. I have no idea what it was about. But I just remember we were going to bed, and I was laying in bed next to him, and I knew that I was wrong, whatever, we had been arguing about. And I knew that I had to admit that to him. Not because not because he needed it, but I knew that it was something in me, like a step that I needed to take. I needed to start admitting when I was wrong. It was really funny because it literally took me at least 5 minutes to get it out of my mouth. Like I laid there and I was like, John, and he said, what? And I was like, you're right. But it took like 5 minutes. It took way longer than that to get it out. And I mean, he started laughing, and that actually really helped, because I think that, he saw the comedy in it. He saw the fact that it was so hard for me, and he definitely appreciated that I said it, but it was really hard. Now it's on camera.
One of the things that really helped us during this season of dark days that we had with our marriage was having people to talk to. There were at least a few people in our life that we trusted and confided in. They were asking questions and asking us to consider things that neither one of us were even thinking about at the time, but we're in fact very revealing. Our perspectives were so colored by our emotions at the time. We weren't seeing straight. God started to show me the lack of grace that I was having on Rachel, and I think he was really sort of showing me that alongside the grace that he has had on me. And his love for me wasn't contingent on my performance, my being perfect. I knew what God required of me, what he wanted, what was right, all that stuff. But I failed all the time. And so I'm looking at this love that God has for me, and then I'm turning and I'm looking at the love that I've been showing to my wife, and I'm starting to see a stark difference between the two, because this love that's been modeled for me, I'm not paying it forward. I'm looking at my wife and saying, well, she's not living up to my standards, and she's not doing everything that I had hoped that she would do. And so I'm going to be frustrated with her and be mad at her and withhold my love and be distant. That's what I was doing. And I think half of it was, I was genuinely hurt and I was bothered. And I think another half of it was me trying to manipulate a response out of her. Maybe I thought on some level that if I distanced myself, if I punished her in a sense, that she would sort of snap out of it and realize that she was causing our marriage to fall apart, and stuff like that. But, that's where God really started convicting me and making me realize that's not his plan for our marriage. That his plan for our marriage is not me teaching Rachel how to be the perfect wife. And so far as I was concerned, his plan for my marriage was everything that I had to do with it. am I loving my wife today as much as I loved her yesterday or more? Just all these different things. How well am I mirroring God's love onto my wife? Am I only loving my wife when I feel like it? Or when I feel like she's deserved it?
I think that, worshiping God in my marriage, it looked a lot like shutting my mouth when I wanted to say something. It was just doing the right things, even when I didn't feel like it. And I don't mean that somebody should be fake, but for me, it was just in those moments, I didn't feel like serving my husband in any way. I didn't feel like making dinner. I didn't feel like doing any practical things because I wasn't happy and I didn't feel connected, but I chose to do the right thing. And I chose obedience. And through time, just not giving up and just continually choosing to do the right thing, those feelings actually came back. Obviously, John and I are still working through things in our marriage. Obviously, there's always going to be, things to work through and things to deal with. But I think that we are at a much better place. I'm able to be more vulnerable with him, even though sometimes I literally have to sit him down and say, I have to be vulnerable with you right now, so listen to me.
If there's one thing that I learned from all of this that I want to share, it's that you really have to just trust God for the other person. You have to do that. You can't rely on your own strength and your own tactics to try to get somebody, to try to force change on somebody. It's not going to work. I know for me, just the fact that I was so charged about Rachel's lack of performance, and I was expressing that to her, and I was upset with her. I know that at the very least that was discouraging her from even being able to try to get back up. So it wasn't doing anything good. Versus switching that and telling somebody, hey, no matter what, I love you. It doesn't matter if you're not perfect. It doesn't matter if you're falling short in this area. I see that and it's okay. I love you. It doesn't matter. I'm in love with you. Isn't that what God communicated to us? And isn't that why we came to him? So, it's just something to think about. And that's really the core thing that God's taught me through this whole thing. Is the whole idea here is we are mirroring the love that was poured out to us. We're mirroring that back onto our spouse, and a lot of times in faith, very much in faith.